Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
I was born right in Clay County, Missouri, near a little place called Kearney, back on September 5th, 1847. My folks gave me the name Jesse Woodson James.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
My early days were actually pretty stable and prosperous, though things changed fast. My father, Robert James, was a Baptist minister and a hemp farmer who owned 6 slaves. He actually helped found William Jewell College nearby. But when I was just a little boy in 1850, he headed off to California to preach in the gold mining camps, got sick, and passed away. My mother, Zerelda, was a strong-willed Kentucky woman. She remarried twice after that, meaning my brother Frank, my sister Susan, and I had to adjust to a changing household. For a brief time, we even had to live with another family before our mother brought us back to the family farm after her final marriage to Dr. Reuben Samuel.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
Most people know me just as Jesse, but I did pick up a nickname that stuck with me among my inner circle. Dingus. I got it because I was cleaning a pistol one day and accidentally shot off the very tip of my finger. Now, I never was one for using cuss words, so instead of swearing, I yelled out that it was the dingus pistol I ever saw. The boys thought that was hilarious, and the name stuck.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
My brother Frank and I grew up on a working farm, so we knew hard labor early on. Our family was respectable, and we were actually quite well educated for the time and place, being raised by a minister and a doctor's wife. We went to school and learned our letters, but the outbreak of the Civil War cut my youth short. I was only a teenager when the world turned upside down.
Was there a specific moment when you realized you were fundamentally different from everyone else?
It wasn't something born inside me, but rather forced upon me in the summer of 1863 when I was just 15. The Civil War was raging, and Missouri was a brutal border state. A company of Union militiamen marched onto our family farm looking for Frank, who was already riding with the Confederates. They roughed me up in the fields, attacked my mother, and dragged my stepfather out to a tree, hanging him until he was nearly dead to get information. That cruelty broke something inside me. I realized right then that I couldn't just be an ordinary farmer. I had to fight.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
In the spring of 1864, at just 16 years old, I made the choice to ride off and join Bloody Bill Anderson's Confederate guerrillas, the Bushwhackers. At the time, it just felt like a young man joining the war to defend his family and his beliefs. But that decision completely severed my ties to a normal life and introduced me to a level of savagery I could never untangle myself from.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement? And what were the consequences?
During the war, we weren't dealing with ordinary police. We were dealing with the Union military. My first real consequence came from riding with Anderson. I participated in the Centralia Massacre in 1864, where we took down an unarmed train of Union soldiers. Because of our guerrilla actions, the authorities issued an order banishing our entire family from Clay County. Shortly after, when the war was ending in 1865, I tried to come in to surrender under a white flag near Lexington, Missouri, but Union cavalrymen shot me right through the chest anyway. My cousin Zerelda Z. Mims nursed me back to health, but that brush with death cemented my status as an outlaw before I ever robbed a single bank.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
That happened in December of 1869. My brother Frank and I rode into Gallatin, Missouri, and held up the Daviess County Savings Bank. I wasn't even looking for a massive payday. I shot the cashier because I genuinely believed he was the man who had killed my old commander, Bloody Bill Anderson. We didn't get much cash, but our escape was spectacular, riding right through a posse. A few days later, my name appeared in the newspapers for the first time. Seeing my name in print across the state made me realize the power of the press.
Did fame make you more dangerous? Or did it simply expose who you already were?
The fame gave me a platform, and I used it. I realized that the newspapers could be a weapon. I started crafting my own narrative, writing letters directly to the editors to deny specific petty crimes while boldly claiming the mantle of a bold robber. I compared myself to Julius Caesar and Napoleon. The notoriety didn't make me softer, it made us more daring because we knew we had the sympathy of old Confederates who hated the radical Republicans running the government.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
Society betrayed us first when the Union troops attacked my home, and when the post-war government disenfranchised Southern sympathizers, making us feel like outcasts in our own state. But the bitterest betrayal came later from the Pinkerton Detective Agency in 1875. They threw an incendiary bomb into my mother's house, trying to catch Frank and me. We weren't even there, but the blast killed my 9-year-old half-brother Archie and blew off my mother's right arm. That shattered any idea that the law had any honor.
What was your most unique habit or random fact about you that would surprise people?
Despite the bloody reputation, I was deeply devoted to my family. I courted my cousin Z for 9 years before we married in 1874, and I named my daughter Mary and my son Jesse after us. When I wasn't on the road with the gang, I lived a completely quiet life. I didn't gamble, I didn't spend my time in saloons, and I loved sitting on the porch playing with my children.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public saw us as romantic, free-riding figures, but the reality was a life of constant terror and isolation. In the letters I published, I tried to explain that we were driven into this life because we weren't allowed to live in peace. Every time a bank was robbed anywhere in the Midwest, the authorities blamed the James boys. We could never drop our guard for a single second.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
Our biggest adversary was the Pinkerton Detective Agency, hired by the express companies and banks to hunt us down. Alan Pinkerton made it a personal crusade to destroy us, which led to that awful bombing at our homestead. We also had a fierce rivalry with the pro-Union townsfolk of the North, which we found out the hard way when we stepped outside our usual territory.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
I carried physical pain for most of my adult life. Having been shot in the chest twice during my youth left me with weak lungs and constant ailments. Beyond that, the mental strain of living under assumed names, moving my wife and young children from place to place to stay one step ahead of a bounty, was a heavy burden to bear.
What was your darkest moment? And was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
Without a doubt, the raid on Northfield, Minnesota on September 7th, 1876. We overreached by going 500 miles away from home into a town that had no sympathy for old rebels. The townsfolk fought back with everything they had. They killed 2 of our men in the streets, and the younger brothers were hunted down, shot to pieces, and captured. Only Frank and I made it out alive. The gang was completely destroyed, and we were forced to flee to Tennessee and live in hiding under assumed names for years, trying to leave the outlaw life behind.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
Sitting in the dark, the hardest truth was knowing that no matter how much the newspapers romanticized us, or how much I wrote letters defending our honor, the life we chose meant we could never truly go home. I knew that the circle of people I could trust was shrinking every single day, and that an outlaw's life rarely ends in old age.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
The law never actually brought me to a courtroom, Calvin. By 1881, the governor of Missouri, Thomas T. Crittenden, had put a massive $10,000 bounty on my head. I had moved my family to St. Joseph, Missouri, living quietly under the name Tom Howard, pretending to be a cattle buyer. I brought 2 new recruits into what was left of the gang, the Ford brothers, Charlie and Bob. I didn't know that Bob Ford had already cut a secret deal with Governor Crittenden to kill me in exchange for the reward and a full pardon.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you? And what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The grandest lie told about me is the whole Robin Hood myth. A newspaper editor named John Newman Edwards helped create this image of us robbing the wealthy railroad barons and giving the gold to poor, struggling farmers. It made for a beautiful story, but it wasn't true. We kept every dime we stole to support ourselves, buy fresh horses, and keep our operational lines open. We didn't hand out cash to the poor.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
People think I was a bloodthirsty monster who enjoyed killing for the sake of it. The truth is, the violence of my life was a direct product of the bitter, bloody Civil War that tore Missouri apart. We were fighting a war that the rest of the country had moved on from, but we felt we couldn't stop.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
Just how mundane my final days were. I took pride in being a regular church-going man when we lived in Tennessee. I loved music. I was fastidious about my appearance, and I spent my final months doing chores around a rented cottage, worrying about making the $14 monthly rent for my family.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
It happened right there in my home, in St. Joseph, Missouri, on April 3, 1882. It was a hot day, and I had taken off my gun belt so neighbors wouldn't see it through the windows while I was doing some cleaning. I noticed a picture of my favorite horse, Skyrocket, was hanging crooked on the wall. I stepped up on a chair to straighten it. While my back was turned, Bob Ford drew his pistol and shot me right in the back of the head. I was 34 years old.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
It was a mix of both, but the world changing played a massive part. The Old West was fading. The telegraphs, the rails, and the growing power of the state governments meant there was no place left for an old-time bandit to hide. My own flaw was trusting the wrong men out of desperation to rebuild what I had lost, failing to see that the code of loyalty we lived by during the war didn't mean a thing to the younger generation looking for a quick payday.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
My mother had my epitaph carved to say I was murdered by a traitor and a coward. And that bitterness was something our family carried. If I could change things, I would have found a way to lay down my guns in 1865 and build a peaceful life with Z from the very start, rather than letting the anger of the war dictate the rest of my days.
What scared you more? Getting caught, losing power, or being forgotten?
The idea of being locked away in a cage by the people I spent my life fighting was always my greatest fear. That's why Frank and I always said we would never be taken alive.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
In my own mind, I always viewed myself as a soldier who was pushed into a corner and chose to fight back against an oppressive system. But history looks at the bodies left behind at the banks and the train tracks, and I reckon people will always see me as a mixture of a rebel hero and a cold-blooded outlaw, depending on which side of the line they stand on.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
I just hope folks look past the dime novels and the legends to see that a life spent on the run isn't something to glory in. It brought nothing but grief to my mother, my wife, and my children.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.